Hi guys, we are the null operators. This is the beginning of our video series for how to code in Java. The purpose of this series is to take you from start to finish, beginner level to advanced level with writing code in Java. So anyone who wants to know how to write code in Java, just stay tuned to this series and we'll get you up to speed. So in order to get started with coding, you're going to need an IDE. That's an integrated development environment. And it's basically just the program that you use to write code. So for Java, before we go ahead and download our IDE, we're going to need to download one additional piece of software, or well, just files really. That's the Java SDK. And all that is a collection of tools that we're going to be used whenever we get started coding. So for now, all you need to do is Google Java SDK. And you're looking for this link right here, the Java SE downloads from Oracle Technology Network. So once you click on that, you want to choose the most recent option, which here is Java SE 15. And to go ahead and download it, you're going to go to this area here and click on the JDK download. So on this screen, all you have to do is scroll on down and choose the specific operating system that you're using. We're using Windows, so we'll go Windows 64-bit installer. And we want the bin.exe, not the bin.zip. So we'll go Windows 64 bin.exe. I've reviewed and accept the conditions and go ahead and download. So once this is done, we'll open it up and I'll show you how to go ahead and get started with installing that. Should boot up here in just a second. So we're going to click next, and I would recommend using this default location for installing it. Unless you know what you're doing, just use the default location because it might create problems later on down the line. So now this is good to go, quick and easy. We'll go ahead and click close, and that is our SDK installed. Now, before we move on to the IDEs, some of the IDEs require you to do a little bit extra with your SDK before they work correctly. So we're going to go ahead and cover that right now. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that Java installed correctly. So we'll go to command prompt, which you can get to by just typing CMD in your search bar. And that'll pull up the command prompt. And we want to type Java space dash version. And here you can see that we have Java version 15.0.1 and all this other stuff. So we are good to go. It has installed correctly. But the next thing we're going to want to do is change our environment variables on our system. And this might seem tedious, but it is necessary for some of these IDEs. So just bear with me and follow along. So the first thing we need to do is navigate to our C folder, which will go this PC down to our C drive. And here in program files, you're looking for Java. And so you want to basically get the path for that JDK. So one more time, I go and I find my Java folder in program files under the C drive. I open that up, and then I open up the JDK, and now I can click at the top, and that'll highlight the entire path. So I'm going to copy that for later. That's Cortana, don't want that. There we go. So now that I have that path copied, I can go ahead and close this out. So now we're going to look for edit environment variables. Nope, let me type that correctly. So we want this top option, the edit the system environment variables. We're going to go click on that. And then towards the bottom, we have this box that says environment variables. We'll click on that as well. And now at the bottom, we have the system variables down here. We're going to create a new one. And we're going to call this variable Java _ home, all caps. And the variable value is going to be that path that we copied earlier. So once you do that, you click OK. And now we are squared away with our SDK. So when dealing with the compilers, we're going to cover installation for 3 different compilers that schools tend to use really often. Just in case you're taking any classes, you won't have to switch around with compilers. You can just follow along. So we'll be talking about IntelliJ, Eclipse, and jGRASP. So the differences between those are not very huge, especially for a beginner. So basically, whichever one appeals to you the most, you can go ahead and use that one, and it's not going to give you any problems. So first, we'll go ahead and download IntelliJ. So typing into Google, just go for IntelliJ download. And the first option here, jetbrains.com, that's the one we want to go to. So we will download IntelliJ. And by the way, if you don't plan on using IntelliJ, there will be timestamps down in the description for whatever else you want to download. So you can check down there and just skip ahead. So IntelliJ has two different versions, like a lot of other IDEs. They have an ultimate version, which is basically their professional version, and they have a community version, which is their free version. So we'll download the community version, the free version. So I want to download the exe. Click that. So once that's done downloading, it'll open up and we'll be able to move on from there. All right, so IntelliJ, the installer, has finished downloading. So we're going to click yes to allow it to make changes. We'll click next. And just like our SDK, I would recommend putting this as the default location, not modifying it unless you know what you're doing. So for us, we're just going to go ahead and click next and next again. Oh, I went too far ahead. So now here, there's a bunch of different tick boxes, and some of these we actually care about. So the ones that we want to check are add open folder as project and also add launchers directory to the path. So make sure that both of those are checked. And unless you're using a 32-bit launcher, you don't need to check this last box for the 32-bit runtime. So we'll go ahead and move on and click install. And that'll be basically everything we need to do for IntelliJ. So now IntelliJ has finished its setup, and we have two options. We can either reboot now or manually reboot later. I'm going to go ahead and choose I want to manually reboot later, and we can go ahead and click finish. So now I'm going to search for IntelliJ here, and I'm just going to right click it and pin it to my taskbar since I'll be using it a bunch, and I'll click to open it. So here I'll confirm that I've read the user agreement and I'll continue. I don't want to send personally my data to JetBrains, so I'll choose don't send. But all these do is help them improve any kind of crashes that are happening with the program. So if you'd like to, feel free to do so, but you're not required to, so I'll choose don't send. So now here is where we can actually create our project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click new project. And what we want to make sure is that in the top left, Java is selected, and that we don't need to select any of these tick boxes. And up here at the top, you can confirm that Java SDK that we downloaded earlier, you can confirm that it's being recognized here. I downloaded the Java SDK 15, and it says Project SDK 15, so we're good to go. So I'll go ahead and click next, and we want to create a project from template, which is going to be a command line app. Click next again, and now here's where we'll actually title our project. So I'll call this just like test project. And we can choose a location where we want to save this. I'm just going to save it in the default location, but I could put it on my desktop or anywhere else, wherever is convenient for you to find it. You can go ahead and just browse and find that location and choose it. Now for the base package, I'm going to get rid of that because I don't need any base package, and click finish. So now here is our actual IDE. This is where we're going to be writing all our code, which the comment here that says write code here is kind of giving you a hint at. So this looks a little bit confusing already, right? Like, what is public class main? What is public static void main? For now, you don't need to worry about those things. The only thing you need to worry about is we're going to write our code right here in this section, and we're always going to write our code right here in this section. So for now, I'll delete that comment, and you can tell that it's a comment because it has that / in front of it. So anytime you see a // it's not actually code that's running. It's just words for the programmers. They're comments for the programmers that can kind of explain your code and things like that. Okay, so we'll delete that comment. And now the first thing we're going to write is system.out.println. I've spelled that incorrectly. .out.println with a semicolon at the end. And inside, we'll put some quotation marks and type hello world. So anytime you are getting started with programming, you're probably going to see this. Basically, all we're doing is sending the message hello world to the screen. So now, if I go to the top right here and I click the play button, we can see that we sent out the message hello world. So congratulations, you've just written your first program. And for now, it's a lot of just follow along and don't worry too much about things, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this in the next video about what is this system.out.println actually doing, what is main, and what are classes, etc. So the next IDE you might want to use is called Eclipse, which is pretty commonly used in a lot of different sectors. I personally don't enjoy it, but since it's so commonly used, we'll include how to download Eclipse as well. So Eclipse we can find, not surprisingly, by typing Eclipse download. And if we already have the Java SDK downloaded from before, so you won't need to re-download that if you followed along with the previous part of the video. If you don't have the Java SDK downloaded already, then you'll need to check back to the beginning of the video and make sure that you get that done before you download Eclipse. And this first option that says Eclipse downloads, we'll go ahead and click on that. So here, this orange box at the very bottom that says Get Eclipse IDE, that's exactly what we want. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And now we can ignore all of this bottom portion and just worry about the top. It's going to be downloading from Canada because that's the nearest mirror to me. Don't need to worry about that. Just going to click download. So once this is done, we'll be able to open it up and get started with downloading Eclipse. Okay, so Eclipse is done downloading. So we're going to go ahead and continue the installation process. What we want to do, there's a bunch of different options here, right? Well, the top one that says Eclipse IDE for Java developers, that's what we want. Eclipse can run C and C++ and a bunch of other stuff. So if you wanted to use it for that, you would choose one of these other ones, but we want Eclipse for Java. So the top option, Eclipse IDE for Java developers, is what we'll go with. So we click that. And now here we can create start menu entries and desktop shortcuts. I won't do that. So instead, we'll just go ahead. Actually, I will create a start menu entry and click install. You could, if you wanted to, change the installation folder, but I wouldn't recommend that. The default's just fine. So unless you have a very specific reason why you want to change that location, I would just leave it as the default location. So let's click install. So now the user agreement is going to pop up. We're going to accept that, and it'll go ahead and begin installing. Okay, so Eclipse is done downloading. So we can go ahead and launch this installer now. So we'll click the big green launch button. So here we'll create our workspace, which is basically just the location of our code. We can go ahead and browse around and choose a different location, but for me, I'm going to go ahead and use the default and just create my workspace there. So I'll click launch. All right, so Eclipse is loaded up. This here is just the tutorial screen basically, and we don't need that. So I'll click the X, and instead we will go here to, on the left side, create a Java project. So I'm going to click that. We'll give it a name, which I'll call it Test Project Eclipse. And we'll use the default location, and we'll also use the default JRE. So down here, make sure that you use the default JRE, and creating separate folders for our sources and class files. That's perfect for us. So now we'll click next, not finished just yet, click next, and we'll uncheck create module info.java file. And this isn't going to make any sense to you, and that's okay. It doesn't have to yet. You'll figure out why we're changing these settings later on whenever you continue to use Eclipse. So now we can go ahead and click finish. And it should pop up with our test project Eclipse here, which it did. So right now there's nothing inside of it. We have this the JRE system library and source, SRC. So we need to actually add a class to this. So we'll right click and create new class. And we're going to call this just main. And we want to check public static void main for a method stub. And the reason is basically we're always going to be writing our code in a location called main. That's the code that runs. So we're auto-populating this just so it gives us the shell initially, and we don't have to write it ourselves. So now we can click Finish, and we see we have public class main with public static void main, and now we can go ahead and start writing our code. So again, initially, you're not going to understand what public class main is. You're not going to understand what public static void main is. So don't worry about these things for now. Just know that this is the place that we need to write our code. So I'll tab over, and I'm going to type system.out.println with a semicolon, and then in quotation marks in the parentheses, I'll type hello world. And so once you finish typing that out, we can go ahead and go to this green play button up here and click run. We'll choose OK. And we see that we sent the message hello world to the screen. So that's what this system.out.println is doing, is it's taking this message and putting it on the screen. So congratulations, you've just written your first program. And don't worry, I'm kind of just telling you what to do for now, but in the next video, we'll dive into why we're doing this and explain what a class is and what this main method is and all these other things. Okay, so our final compiler, our IDE that we'll be installing is called jGRASP. And I personally like jGRASP a lot. A lot of people don't. And the reason I like it is the reason that a lot of people don't. It's very bare bones. There's no code auto-completion or anything like that. It's just super lightweight, super simple. So that's why I prefer it. So in order to download it, we'll go jGRASP download in Google. And this first option, jgrasp.org, that's the one we want to select. And this will take us to this page. In the top right, we'll click download jGRASP. And there's a bunch of stuff here. You actually don't have to fill out any of this information. So we'll just scroll down and click on the option that is jGRASP and whatever the current version is that requires Java 8 or higher. And the top option for Windows, I'm using a Windows machine, so that's the program that I'll download, jgrasp.exe. And we'll go ahead and open this up. We'll choose yes to allow it to make changes. And now I'll click next. I agree. Next. And next. If you wanted to, you could change this destination folder. I wouldn't recommend doing so unless you have some reason to do so. So I'll leave mine as the default and just click next. And then we'll click next again. And we'll create all these associations, which you'll figure out what they mean later. And for now, we'll just install. Finally, we click finish, and jGRASP is good to go. So I'll look for jGRASP over here, and I'll pin it to my taskbar. So the first box that's going to pop up, since this is the first time I'm running jGRASP, is asking me which theme I want to use. And I prefer a dark theme, so I'm just going to click Metal Dark Low Contrast and go ahead and click Next. Whichever one of these appeals to you, you can go ahead and use that. It's just aesthetic for you as the programmer. And I will uncheck Allow Statistics Reporting. This is just in case you have any crashes or anything like that, any bugs with jGRASP itself. It'll automatically send that information to the developers of jGRASP so that they can fix any of those issues. But for me, I don't personally like sending out my information, so I'm just going to untick that box. Whatever you choose is perfectly fine either way. So now we will click Finish, and we're good. This is jGRASP. So the first thing we want to do, we want to write code, right? We need to create a new Java file. So again, I went up to File, New Java. And so in here, we're going to need to type out public class, and I'll call this main. And we'll open up some curly braces. And down here, we'll need to type public static void main with a string array of arguments, along with some more curly braces. So those two things that we just typed, They're just something you need to memorize for right now. You're not going to understand them, but we'll cover them in future videos. The important thing is just that the location where my cursor is right now is where our code goes. If we want to run any code, we need to be inside of main. So I'm going to go ahead and type system.out.println hello world. And now that this is done, I'll click this green play button to compile it just to see if there are any issues. It'll ask me to save, and I'll choose to save. I'll call this main.java, and I'll save it on my desktop. You can choose to save it wherever you want. This is just wherever you want to be able to store this file. So we save it, and now I can click the red running man right next to the green play plus button, and that'll actually run my code. And you see that we get this message, hello world. So what we did is we took this message in quotation marks and we sent it into the screen. So that's just the first thing that we're going to do with coding in Java. But if you made it this far, congratulations, you just wrote your first program. So one other place that you can actually write code is in a web browser. So some people don't enjoy downloading additional programs onto their computer, and they use this method with repl.it to write and test their code online just on a web browser. I personally don't like this approach, but if it's something that you find interesting or want to test it out, all you need to do is go to repl.it, which is repl.it, and that'll take you to this page here. So we'll click Start Coding, and it'll take you to your login page or sign up page. So we'll click the Google button to log in with Google, and that will take you here. So on this page, in the top left, we'll click these 3 horizontal bars, and we'll go down to My REPLs. And now you will have this page in front of you. So we'll click the plus sign with New REPL, and we want to write our code in Java, so we'll choose Java from the dropdown, and we need to give it a name now. So I'll just call this repl.it test, and then click the Create REPL button. So that will load up this screen here, and this is actually all the code that we need to put a message onto the screen. So if we run this right now, if we click the Run button, after REPL grinds its gears for a little bit and figures out what we want to do, it'll spit out this message onto the screen. So we see this message that we put here, hello world, exclamation point, was just displayed on the screen right here. So if we wanted to say something different, we could say hello universe. And when we run this again, so now we can see, after we ran it again, we get the different message, hello universe. So if writing code in a web browser is something you're interested in, check out repl.it. Otherwise, just check the timestamps in the description for the other IDEs that you might want to download and install that you can do this exact same thing with. All right, I've been Ed with Null Operators. We'll see you in the next video.